So I'm here at Stanford University, currently doing a research visit at the Stanford Digital Economy Lab, working on thinking about societal impact from advanced AI. And I wanted to record a quick video, just reflecting a little bit on what's it like to be at Stanford as a European, and also reflect on some of my conversations here, because I've spoken with a lot of people asking them what they think about EU policy, what they think about AI development, directions, where it's going, what they think about regulation, stuff like that. It's kind of interesting. Might be fun to reflect a little bit on that. I've been here for a month, so I have had limited conversations, but still, it's been quite insightful and interesting for me. First of all, this place here, Stanford, the campus, is just incredible. I don't think there's anything comparable in Europe. I don't really think that there's anything comparable here in the US. It's just really beautiful, the campus. The talent this place has been able to attract is just second to none. It's really amazing. I could literally fill up my whole 3-month visit here with just meeting some of the brightest, some of the most ambitious people in academia. But they're not only in academia. A lot of professors here, for example, have side businesses. So they're really applying a lot of their knowledge. They're drawing from practical fields to influence their own academic research. And that's really positive. But of course, on the other hand, it can create conflict of interest. You can bias your research if there's a business motive, if there's a commercial interest. But in any case, it's a very special environment. And maybe kind of one thing to just provide as an example why it's so special. Just, a couple of days ago, we had a seminar or a talk here. David Alder from MIT came here. David is one of the most influential and well-known labor economists in the world. And he came here to talk about the impact of automation on the labor market. And afterwards, staff from the Digital Economy Lab, they could have conversations one-on-one with David, and just, and this is not a one-off example of some prominent academic thinker coming over to speak about pressing issues. They have these types of talks every week, almost every day. You could, again, fill up your whole calendar having going to events like these. Just very special. I also wanted to, think for a couple of minutes about what I've learned so far, having conversations with people. So I've met with a lot of academics, but I've also met with some businesses, and it's very interesting to see what people think about the EU, what their perspectives are on it. So most people just say outright that they don't follow the EU very much. They don't know very much about it. So they have some kind of limited perceptions. But so far, my conversations have indicated that people view EU quite positively and EU policymaking. For example, one person told me that in their view, the EU policymaking process is very methodical. A lot of smart people come together, they negotiate, they discuss things, and they figure out, quite useful proposals to regulate technology or whatever other thing it is. On the other hand, these smart people can also overthink. They can make things very complicated. So regulations in the EU can be very complex and very hard to interpret and parse. That's something somebody told me. Another perspective that I got from a computer science researcher here was kind of about the culture here and what kind of things might lead talent to leave or to come to places. And so we reflected a lot on kind of what kind of people come here and why do they come here. And some things that we just kind of thought or acknowledged was that actually if you think about California, California has quite strong regulations and quite high taxes. So the question is, why aren't people leaving this place and why are they coming here? It must be something else than regulation or these types of regulations being the main factor for whether somebody comes here or leaves. And we thought that really network effects are the main thing. So if a lot of ambitious people come here, they start initiatives, there's a great university here, a lot of talented people come to study here. And not just Stanford University, there are other universities close by that are also very good. And that all kind of amplifies the network, and more people come here again and want to stay here. It's really about the network effects and the type of culture, the ambition that people have here to start new companies, to really well academically, to be, to be ambitious, accomplish a lot of things. That's really the main thing. This is a caricature, but like you could theoretically tax the hell out of this place and just make it very difficult to start companies. And you would really have to do that very harshly in order for these people to leave because of just how much human capital has gathered here. That was like one key thing we thought about. Of course, this doesn't mean that regulations don't have their place. Of course, regulations can hinder, regulations can help, but really, it doesn't seem the main thing. Uh, it's more about kind of what type of projects people can work on and what kind of people are here. That was another reflection from somebody. Uh, one person told me that in their view, the EU Act, for example, seems to be a very reasonable legislative framework. It's quite flexible. It doesn't prescribe very precisely what companies need to do. They have a lot of freedom to figure out on their own how to implement it. And yeah, they thought this was a very reasonable framework, though they told me that they're no expert and can't really speak to many of the specifics. But yeah, this was a person who was an academic, but also had an industry background. So yeah, those kinds of perspectives. One thing that I've found, which is interesting, maybe not super surprising, but some of the Europeans here that I met, they have been the most critical of the EU. It's not surprising because there's a particular reason probably why they're here rather than in the EU. But for example, somebody asked me, partially a rhetorical question, what can California learn from the EU regarding AI development and deployment? This person was, alluding to the fact that some of the most capable models, the cutting edge, leading technology is coming from this place. It's being built here, not in the EU. So what can really the EU teach California about AI development and deployment? I don't think that the EU cannot teach anything. Um, the EU can definitely teach about governance because the EU is having very serious experiments right now. It has been having them for a couple of years now. So definitely can teach about that. I think the EU definitely has strengths in specific industries, the use of AI in pharmaceutical, robotics, some other fields. So I think the EU can definitely teach something to Californians. There is not like the EU is not doing any AI development whatsoever. Of course they are. They have a different approach. They haven't built these huge language models and general purpose AI models. That's not been the approach. I don't think the EU should have that approach. Of course, the EU should build their own large language models, but not definitely aim for the development of artificial general intelligence or anything like that. That could be dangerous on the one hand. On the other hand, it could be very costly also. It's not clear that it's the most useful way to approach AI development economically. Maybe it's much better to build tool AI and focus on specific sectors where you already have strengths and deploy them there to solve very concrete problems. Maybe that's a better approach. But yeah, that was an interesting perspective. with one person from the EU who was a practitioner working on health AI applications. We spoke a lot about what the EU would need to do in order to attract talent from the US, maybe Europeans who are here, or also Americans, or whatever nationalities to the EU. And this person said that, yeah, there are a lot of people right now who would want to go to Europe to do research there. I think the main thing they need is resources. For example, they need a lot of compute, they need freedom to research what they want. Those are like the kind of very practical things. Of course, they need good salaries. Their work needs to be compensated well. So that's something that the EU can improve. The EU oftentimes in many countries has very high quality of life it can offer. So you can market this better and do that better. And probably also get rid of pointless red tape. There is some red tape in the EU that really doesn't serve any useful purpose. As either just historical, we have sort of been used to doing things a certain way. There's a lot of fragmentation in the EU. Doing one documentation in one country, then you need to do something else in another country if you want to expand your projects. So these kinds of things should be rethought, whether we can unify work in the EU more easily. Also, I think we should also reflect on what kinds of requirements should we pose on what kinds of activities. So it really bothers me that, for example, an academic who is running an experiment on 10 people, say, about their beliefs and their emotions and whatnot, sensitive topics, they have quite serious requirements to do those kinds of experiments. But on the other hand, if Meta runs an experiment, a manipulation experiment on millions of people, they really don't seem to have many requirements there. This seems very off. Like, surely running an experiment on 10 people is less dangerous than running an experiment on a million people. So like these kind of things should be reflected upon and streamlined and figured out. So yeah, that's another reflection. I'm sure I have many more. I have a lot of people that I want to meet here. Looking forward to that. But yeah, I wanted to share a couple of thoughts from my first month here.